Do we look at the camera? Do we not?
Nah.
Is this a show about nothing?
Like, what are the vibes?
The Seinfeld?
The Seinfeld
The Seinfeld episode?
Basically.
It's like an office show.
This episode is brought to you by Diet Pepsi, cherry flavor.
Only the cherry
Only
flavor.
cherry flavor.
Great.
What's up, YouTube? We're Kinetic Impact over here, and today we have our guest, Chen, visiting from New York City, and we're gonna have some fun and cool discussions today. Keeping it lighthearted and crack some jokes in between.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. Super pumped. I grew up with Kevin, met Ben, what was it, like?
About a year ago.
Yeah, and then Don, we've talked a little bit, so it's cool to be in the same room.
Slid in each other's DMs.
Yeah, and they gave me a Diet Pepsi, so I feel at home.
Yeah, absolutely. We're in our facility in San Diego. You just hosted a course in LA. So let's talk a little bit about the course and what you bring to the table with the course.
Yeah.
I'm interested. I didn't get to go. I had a wedding to go to.
They had FOMO. The kids would call FOMO.
Yes.
FOMO,
Yes.
yeah.
Huge FOMO this weekend, not able to go myself. Yeah.
No, I think the course, to me, it's a starting point, right? I think there are certain things that everyone in our profession should know. And no matter what we're doing, if you're gonna try to learn something else, you should understand these things. Like, you should have some principles. You should understand what heuristics are. You should understand that methods can only serve the latter. And if you know what your methods are, and if we're movement providers, it's squat, hinge, push, pull, carry, lunge, jump, throw, sprint, all your multi-directional patterns. And if you can do all those things, regress it and progress it, now you've got a plan. And if we try to recreate these scenarios in our head all the time, it gets super, super exhausting. So the weekend was really exposing people to a different kind of thinking and also showing them that the job that they do is freaking important, because there's just so many unnecessary treatments, unnecessary surgeries being done. And right now, when we look at the landscape of health, most people now are dying because they're physically inactive. And we're really good at keeping people alive because of all the medical inventions that we've had. But with the current state, 80% of people in the world die from like metabolic disease, cancer, all these things that are influenced by remaining physically active. But the problem is 4 out of 5 kids are physically inactive, and 3 out of 4 adults are physically inactive. And we've got a lot of money being put into other, institutions that aren't keeping kids active, right? Less money in school, and if less money in school, they're gonna stop all the gym activities. They stop gym activities, and kids don't move. We know that physical activity as a kid predicts physical activity as an adult, and all these numbers are matching up. So just showing people, like, man, if you're a group fitness instructor, a trainer, a coach, a chiropractor, a physician, like, you can slowly move people towards, one, getting out of pain or moving better, but also moving for the rest of their life. And then we got yoked.
Yeah, that's what we like to tell trainers too when we work with trainers. Like, trainers, you guys are like a first line of defense in terms of healthcare. Like, the likelihood to see a trainer before a healthcare provider. They don't need direct access. They have the tools to be able to get you fit. May not be the best program, but getting the step in the door of just moving. Getting exposed to whether it's lifting weights, running, aerobic program. It doesn't gotta be perfect. It's just gotta be a start.
And the best program's like the one that a person's going to adhere to, right? From a fitness side, when you get into performance, there is a big dichotomy between like performance and fitness. The concept of getting somebody tired versus getting somebody better. You mentioned something really interesting earlier, and I wanted to talk to you about metrics. So the one thing that you can see when you look at like statistics, you'll see that there's an increasingly disproportionate amount of money being spent on fitness-related things, but we still see this massive uptick of metabolic diseases, things that have lifestyle influences that could be affected. And we're here to actually talk to you a little bit about, like, hey, what are some really, really, really good metrics that we can use with our people? The problem when we just look at simply metrics, right, like tools that we can use to monitor things, the tools that we have are just following those people that really want to be measured, or those people. So we get better people better, but how do we really, really affect people, not just the ones that want to get better, but really that part of the population that's dying off, right? Like, we can measure an unhealthy person so many different ways, right, than we could before. And now we have all these other things to go, like, look how unhealthy you are. Look at your feet. They don't bounce, right? So we can measure rate of force production, feet off the ground. And that's one thing that's really, really cool. But how do we, like, get people, because there's a disconnect between the technology that we have to measure and influence outcomes to like getting people up and active, right? Like that's a big problem, right? And I think that's like something that you were sharing that you address and you're really, really passionate about. I do think though that we need to be better with our rehab, right? Like understanding some of those principles more. And then creating like an environment that makes things maybe feel a different way. I think that the problem is like why is so many people inactive? Like what are your thoughts, you know? Is the technology hurting us or helping us? And then what technologies do you think are some really, really good go-tos when you're looking at metrics to get people back into playing? I know like one thing that keeps people from doing things they like to do is if they're not into the gym, they might like doing an activity like pickleball, basketball, baseball, whatever the sport is. And they decide like, hey, this is what I want to do to get active. But there's physical traits and qualities that haven't been cultivated. So that person gets hurt. And now what they want to do, which could be any one of those sports to get active, they can't do it because they're injured. So to backtrack, how do we get more people moving? Second, like what are some really, really good metrics that we can use? Like how can we use the tech to support this process? So what are your thoughts on some of that stuff?
No, that's a great question. There's a ton of money being spent on fitness. Like that spending is going to be in the trillions eventually. And the problem with it is the people that are spending on fitness are people that have money. You know, with like the 80% of people that are dying from metabolic disease, 80% of those people tend to come from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. So that's something where I presented it that way because I was just letting people know, like, there's certain things built into society where we're not always going to be able to help a certain population. It's very tough because, you know, some of us are born halfway through the finish line. Some of us are born way behind the starting point. So some of those socioeconomic things where it's like you're part of a zip code that maybe you don't get as much funding from the government, right, for just general things. You don't have as much access to like parks and general recreational activities. And those are things where we talked about it at the seminar. It's like if you're a provider, an entrepreneur, and you're doing really well, like go out there, donate your time, donate your money, and it's the least that we can do. The thing that sucks is like you'll wake up one day and you realize you can't change the world, but you could change your community. And I think if everyone starts to wake up thinking like that, like it sounds weird, think smaller, right?
Yeah,
like think smaller.
And circle of influence thought process.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Think smaller and try to impact the people around your community. But with the tech stuff, there's so many ways to start to utilize it because there's people that come from these backgrounds, or there's people that aren't quite as medically literate. You know, they're terrified. It's like, oh, I slipped a disc. I can't move ever again. I can't lift that heavy. So let's say you're doing a mid-thigh iso pull. Instead of like ramping up as hard as you can, as fast as you can, for someone that's coming in with like chronic back pain, and they're terrified of lifting, let's say, a 53-pound kettlebell, hey, Tom, you're going to come in, and I just want you to gently tug on this barbell. And I want you to slowly tug it to the point where you're slowly feeling like some muscle work, but it should still feel safe. And maybe we're going to like 70%, 80%. Maybe if we're getting crazy, let's get to 90%. But you'll have people pull over 100. And then you show them this, and it'll be like, wow, I didn't think I could do that. So it's like if you came in and we just did a couple of sets of 5 with 53, we would be wasting time. And it also shows that you're way more capable than you think. Now someone's just gonna be like, holy cow. And that's gonna change over time. And then, you know, with educating people on these kind of tests, it's like, I always say, you gotta make it contextual, right? Because none of the things matter. Okay, I can lift 100 pounds, but why does that matter? Well, Tom, your kid's about to move into their dorm, and now you gotta be helping her with her luggage, carrying it up the stairs. Well, we do exercises like that. Look at Susie over there. She's doing a suitcase carry, or she's doing a step up. These are all things that are trainable, right? The body is so predictable. If I give it a particular stress, and it's the right amount of stress, it's gonna create an adaptation. If I don't stress you enough, you're gonna lose your ability to lift 100 pounds. And I overstress you, well, you're gonna get hurt. And it's finding that right starting point and constantly dosing it over time where you're gonna feel way more capable.
So I think you're referencing like a mid-thigh pull using like a force plate, right?
Yeah.
Where you set it up and then you're going to show them like, hey, look how much you're pulling, and you don't even realize like how much you're pulling. And we're trying to chase adaptation, right? Like you get what you train for, but you're going to have to take that person's thought of what they believe to be heavy, what they're capable of doing, and you're using the tech to essentially just challenge their belief about themselves, right? And that gives you a window to go like, let's get jacked,
Yeah,
right?
let's
Like,
get jacked, yeah.
like, can we get this person stronger? And like, how strong is this person coming in? And are we wasting time having them pull stuff or doing submaximal load to build up mental tolerance versus like physical adaptation? And that in itself is you can go both directions on the benefit of either side of that.
Yeah, I love the coin of getting buy-in with the tech as opposed to like just thinking about the physiological adaptations, right? Because like you talk to clinicians about it, it's all about like limb symmetry index. It's all about these things where it's like you're chasing these adaptations, which makes sense, right? But in the context means everything to the person in front of you, right? So it's like I love how you put that into context and like because it takes a novel stimulus, a situation where they're not used to and they can't they're not used to predicting, oh, this is going to be painful versus like picking a kettlebell off the ground or like something off the ground where they're used to. It's the setup's a little different, the environment's a little different, and they're able to gauge a little bit more. And the next thing you know, hey, that's like 100 pounds. Yeah. But if you ask them to do 100 pounds, there'd be no way to.
Absolutely, they're not picking that up.
No,
right?
I love that. I had another question for you. We were talking about it a little bit before, but I kind of want to make a case for it's like in-person courses and like there's so much information online, right? We can get so much information online, but like I feel so passionate about taking in-person courses because I think the value is so much larger, and everybody should look at stuff online too, obviously.
Yeah, sure.
We have everything at our fingertips. But what do you feel like the value of in-person courses is, not just like your course, but any course, really?
Yeah. No, I love in-person courses. Like, I love the breakouts. I love the social aspect. Like, we try to host a happy hour the day of. We cater lunch the day for the second day. And it's like just being able to mix and mingle and have opportunities to build your contact list. You know, one of the most common questions we were asked this weekend was like, how do you network? And I was like, man, I don't network. I just make friends, right? Like, imagine we're all in the playground and it's first grade. It's like, Ben, you like to work out? I like to work out. Do you want to be friends? It's that easy. But now as adults, like, we're always thinking of like,
I mean, I feel like Ben did that.
yeah. But that's how you gotta do it, right? It's like as adults now we're thinking like, what does he think of me? Am I wearing the right shirt? Are my sneakers cool enough? And there's all of these things, but like when you're in a room filled with people that share the same interests and you're all on the same mission, oh man.
So easy to connect. Like this weekend I was there meeting the like-minded people from the community, just like, wow, we followed each other already. And now we're just meeting people in person, we're just connecting, talking about the same stuff that we're passionate about. It's just easier to be friends. You're just like, wow, we just want to make a difference together.
Yeah, I mean, we do an online mentorship as well, and we've had a couple of mentees at the actual course. There's a lot of stuff you can get done online. Like, we used to run an athletic adults program when I was with Ryan, and that was like, we were seeing people all over the world get better with kettlebells, run faster, and this is just training in your living room. A couple of kettlebells doing track drills. So like virtually, we're still able to do a ton of stuff, but cleaning up the little things in person make a huge difference. And it's not something that you might need for everyone, but you just need to have as many things in your back pocket to show people like, hey, you can still do the split squat without any knee pain. You can still do this exercise and feel your hips instead of your back. And that lets that person know that there's a state or position that exists where you can comfortably train to gradually progress. And that's the beauty of in-person, is like, the tactile feedback is not something we would always use for our patients, but for movement providers, it lets them know immediately because we're so in tune with our bodies.
I love that.
Absolutely. So what would be like some pitfalls that you see? Like, you work with a lot of clinicians. You probably see, when you're a teacher of courses, you end up attracting a certain kind of person, right? Like, you get like the course junkies, or you get like the first person.
Course junkies.
Yeah, like I'm a course junkie. I'm like, hey, I need a hit. What's the next one? It's knee rehab. Let's go. You know, so like you've been around. Like, you go to them, and then you enjoy it, right? For me, there's a social aspect. Like, I'll go because it's like I'd rather go to this course this weekend than get drunk at the bar. I want to.
Or you can,
I was gonna say, like, listen, we got you covered, man.
But you get like your course junkies, you get like your people that haven't ever been to a course, right? Like it's a first experience. You know, those are like big eye openers where you're always wondering what they take away from it. But where do you see like a new clinician? Like if you're a new clinician just starting out and you're excited, right? So like the world's your oyster and you're looking at all these different kinds of things and now you've got like that person in front of you. And we do talk about like the idealistic, hey, I'm going to just start my own business and we're going to go out there and then like I got all the time I want with the person because I have my own business, which is like naivety, or you're just blessed because if you walk out and like you hit the ground running and that's an easy business model for you, just give us a call. I'd like to hear what you have to say more about that. But that part's hard, right? Like getting into it. So for those guys that are new, like getting their feet wet, specifically like physical therapy, you got 30 minutes with somebody, like what are some things that you'd be like, hey, this is where you can go sideways too quick, or here's some fundamentals. Like where are the basic pitfalls that you see in a shorter condensed time where you have a high volume of people and you're trying to avoid that burnout? What would you suggest to them? Because that's real. Right? Like these are the people, like we talk about creating change and effectiveness, you know, it starts with that mindset between the ears. Like I can't tell you how many younger clinicians I hear, and maybe even I said this as a younger clinician. I got 30 minutes, I can't do shit with the person, like this system's fucked, this guy's coming in here, we got this, and all I hear is like, you guys, there's like a human sitting in front of you for 30 minutes. Like what are you gonna do with them? Not what can't you do with them, what can you do with them? And to keep that fresh and to keep the change going and to keep people excited, like what would you say is an area where they could go, hey, look at this a little bit differently, and here's something that I see a lot of guys miss early on?
No, and it's one of those things, like if I had the answer for burnout, I'd be rich, you know, like that wouldn't be a problem. So like I'm always going to be able to speak from a perspective where I've been burnt out myself, but I also work in an environment where I have a little bit more time. So when I say these things, I don't want you to feel like, oh, easier said than done. I can't tell you what works, but I can tell you what doesn't work. You know, like what doesn't work is not understanding what your framework is. Right? You guys probably understand what you do pretty fundamentally well. That within the first session, it's probably like, you know, you should probably see someone because this isn't something that we probably can rehab. And if this is within our scope, it's like, well, if you walk through my door, I need to know how you're going to get back to running. It shouldn't be a guess. I shouldn't recreate the scenario every single time in my head. 80% of my treatment process is already done. Once I hear someone's story and I go through my assessment, I already know what's going to happen. The 20% now is really going to figure out what lateralizations do I have to make. You know, do I have to do this in a slower tempo, a faster tempo? Do I limit the range of motion? But the progressions are already baked in my head. So if you've got 30 minutes, you need to know what your progressions and regressions are, without a doubt. You know, you need to know that you can do a TRX split squat, then a regular split squat, then a quick split squat drop, into a forward lunge, into a banded lunge with a band anchor in front of you to get more eccentric first. Then you can do a walk to lunge stop, then you can do a jog to lunge stop, and now you can decelerate, right? But like you should know that so well and be able to communicate that so well so that the person gets excited to do that exercise. And then show them how it's related to everything else.
Yeah, so I think like one thing that you just described was a master of like a fundamental concept, like a split squat or that, and then taking that through regressions and progressions. If I'm new and I got one person, it's like, hey, I think like this, we're gonna start with a split squat series. I got you for 30 minutes. Let's see what we can do with this and really, really dive into this for that person because there's gonna be a lot of benefit from that before we start putting all these other things into play with it. What's another area, like I could say like, for me that helped was not like looking at the calves, right? Looking at the lower leg. I think that's still missed a lot. Like the benefit of like a pogo, right? Like a pogo is one of those, like to me a pogo is up, it's like push, pull, carry pogo, you know, like, like I think there's a lot of meat to chew on, like that force, the ability to create and reduce force effectively through like minimal hopping, right? Like that can get you back to running 2 feet, 1 foot. Like that's an area that has a lot of benefit. But what other things would you say is like a huge miss, or like I see guys that get really, really excited with like a new toy or something. Is there just like a certain fundamental that you've seen that kind of gets brushed over continually that you're always going back to?
I would say it's biomechanics. I just don't think people understand biomechanics and like how much force people are already able to tolerate based on their everyday life. right? Like if you're listening to someone's story and they tell you they were running for the bus, you don't have to do snap downs anymore, right? You don't have to do marches, and you don't have to master a march. If they've already jogged, you could probably do more higher scale locomotor drills. If someone walks up and down this stair, they can probably start to do plyometrics already, right? We waste so much time with stuff that is easier than the things that they do in day-to-day life that it's mind-blowing. Like clinicians will spend 2 or 3 weeks with like a drop squat. And I'm like, they've already jumped before in their life. They've already gone up and down the stairs really, really fast, right? If you go up and down really, really fast, that's already a plyometric. You're already putting more strength through your body. And if you're having 30 minutes with a person and the insurance is gonna cap it within 3 months, every session has got to count. Every session's got to count. But on top of that, you know, I wanted to bring up one more point is you kind of said it before. It's like these things only get done if the person actually wants to get it done. And if you're not taking into account like, hey, asking questions like how much time would you like to devote to something like this? And if they tell you it's like, hey, honestly, I only got 2 days, 30 minutes, perfect, because that's enough. We can get a lot of quality work done in 2 days and 30 minutes. Within that 30-minute session, maybe you're not doing your full 3 sets of 8, right? Maybe you're just doing 1 or 2 sets of 8 when it looks good. It's like, okay, Mary, we're doing it here, just 1 set. But when I send you the program, I want you to do 3 sets. Then you can move on to all the other things. But push, pull, carry, pull, like all those things make sense, right? If you're rehabbing someone upper body and they're not playing their sport anymore, right? Because there's a contact sport. Well, you still have to condition the lower legs. Let's bounce a little bit in between sessions. Let's add some, calf raises in between sessions. But it always is relating it back to what people want. People don't want more calf strength. People want to feel more explosive when they get back into the field. It's like this is a calf exercise to get you stronger calves so that you can be more explosive because you haven't been able to practice because you can't sustain any contacts currently. But it's making sure that they know what that exercise bridges to because then they get excited.
So, I mean, for you, and this is huge, right? You're talking about buy-in, right? And you're talking about connecting dots. So when you have a short time period, you got to get the buy-in through connecting dots. And if you're not connecting dots for the person, like it doesn't matter what they do there, right? Because there's no value in it for them. So it's getting them to buy in. And I think like one thing that strength and conditioning coaches are really, really good at, and this is what I really like about a strength and conditioning coach, is you don't have to be a cheerleader, but really good strength and conditioning coaches, you walk into that weight room and I could tell you whose weight room it is because of the way that guy's the thermostat, right? You got some guys where it's like super, super high energy. You got some guys that aren't always super high energy, but it's like the room is always getting shit done. And whoever's in there is coaching that. So I think like as a practitioner, if that person's coming in, they're already feeling terrible about what's going on. And you're like, just a number. All right. So we're going to go through our regular things and you're not the thermostat for that person. You're done. When you work with somebody, because this is always hard, right? Like what is your initial step to try to create that buy-in? Because you got to get the buy-in before you connect dots. If you don't have any buy-in, then what you're connecting is abstract for the person. What are some like go-to questions that you might have? Or again, as a younger clinician, hey, before you going down this depth jump, where's this person at on buy-in? Like where do you find like you get that? And you're really, really good at it, right? Like every time I'm around you, I'm like, I want to go work out with this guy, right? You create that, you are a thermostat in that sense. But for another coach, or if you're feeling burnout, where would you say like, hey, this is where you need to check in with the person?
No, this is where like you got to be a little bit more worldly, right? Like I get a feel of like what someone's day-to-day is like by the clothes they wear, by what they did this past weekend. Like you can kind of shoot your shot. Sometimes the first question I might ask is like, you watched Love is Blind last night? Like that was crazy, right? And then they let their guards down a little bit. It's like, oh, this is gonna be a different kind of conversation.
Right, relate.
Yeah, relate to somebody. If someone wears a shirt and you've been there before, like, you know that spot? I love that tackle spot. And trying to break down the barriers of, one, I think of everyone that I work with, not as a patient, but like a friend. Like, I genuinely care about your well-being, and I think that's how healthcare providers should be. And before I can even tell you what to do, I want you to be able to trust me as a person, because that's who I am first. And then you trust me as a physical therapist. So I had a LinkedIn coach, and she was the one to help me with this. And I'll try anything for 3 months. It's a very expensive 3 months. But I was like, yo, when are we gonna start to talk about physical therapy on LinkedIn? She goes, Andy, no one cares that you're a physical therapist. They care about who you are as a person. What are your beliefs? What are your thoughts on business? What are your thoughts on life? What are your thoughts on career? Right? Because that's the main thing that people go on LinkedIn for. And when you provide context about that, they'll enjoy your perspectives on that as a person, and then they'll want to work with you as a physical therapist. And when they think about, oh, I need physical therapy, oh, that guy and I see eye to eye on so many things, so I'm gonna trust them. You know, the crowd that we had today, amazing group. I was like, show of hands, your favorite patient that you work with. You guys were pretty similar, right? Everyone raised their hand. Because that's who we tend to work with. We work with people that are similar to us, or people that we aspire to be.
Damn, man, that's why I got all the weird patients.
No, explain
I'm just joking. My patients are great.
That's the goal.
That's why I got all the best ones. Yeah. That's why I keep telling you, people I work with are way better than your guys'. No. Those are good points.
Maybe start thinking too, like when we were talking about like the strength coaches, something that I learned from, I guess sports in general is there's always a plan, right? There's always like strategy toward the end common goal. And typically a structured practice looks like, what are we gonna do today? And at the end of the practice, what did we achieve today? And I think that's something that younger clinicians or people that feel as though they don't have time often don't utilize that in any way, shape, or form. It doesn't have to be at the beginning and end, debrief and debrief again at the end. But I think that's a value that strength coaches have taught me that I think we can learn a lot from in the clinical world. Like we were talking earlier about the importance of like relationship and the long-term game instead of like the symptom modification game, and I think that's a huge way to get buy-in, right? Is to relate and to become friends with somebody, an actual family. Right?
Yeah. There's so much that, like before we do intervention, it's not like, hey, can I get a systematic review and a meta-analysis of whether or not this is going to work? Like we
Right.
are movement providers. You know, like if someone does a step down and they never translate their hips back, and their knees move forward a lot, and it's like it's really bothering your knee, and maybe that's that's your strategy right on the left side. And then we do a couple of exercises to open up the posterior hip capsule, and then we retest it, and it feels good. Move on. That's something measurable that changes, and maybe that person had knee pain going down the stairs, and now you're giving them hope. And that's the goal, right? With like every single session, it's like I'm just trying to get more time to build your trust, to show you that I can take you where you want to be. And if you can do that, they'll keep coming back. And eventually it's, hey, you're either going to train with me or I'm going to teach you how to train. And that's a Ryan Chow quote, so shout out to Ryan.
That's great. No.
I think this is going to be like a really good question for you, because this is always where I learn the most. Is tell us about one of those cases that you wish you could have back, right? Like you learned something that you were like, this would really apply to this person, and I didn't get the outcome I wanted with that person, right? Like they either stopped coming back or just you didn't get the outcome. The person didn't get better, because that happens. Tell us like one of like a really one that like was burned into your brain where you feel like you could have done a better job, and then what piece of information that you got that made you a better clinician.
Yeah, so one of my first patients, she came in, she had a fully torn meniscus. And when she was coming in, she was kind of like doing the stairs like one step at a time, right? To offload the other leg. And it was still some swelling, a little warm, but it was already better. So we go through some of our prep items, a lot of the ground-based things. You know, your bridges, your side bridges, just kind of getting whatever we can to get the lower leg start to warm up, some calf raises. And as we kept checking some of our stuff, you know, our screens, like the tosses started to feel more comfortable, knee flexion started to feel more comfortable, like perfect. Then we got into deadlifting, and you know, she was deadlifting and things were feeling great. And then we retested just stairs to see how things were feeling. This is like my very first patient as a full-time physical therapist. And I was just retesting everything. We would just retest, retest. And then she was like, stairs feel better. I'm like, perfect, let's keep going. And we kept pushing the weights, and she had a flare-up that first session. And I remember I was like, I don't know what to do. I've never hurt somebody before. So I took her to the back room. One of the therapists on staff helped me calm her down, but she never came back afterwards. And I'll never forget her because you learn a lot of valuable
Absolutely.
lessons from
The best,
Yeah.
right?
And for me, it's the fact that like whenever you're working with someone that's in acute pain, my goal is to not get them yoked. My goal is to get them feeling hopeful again, that they can slowly bridge the gap. I'm not trying to get someone to a RPE 9 out of 10 session. I'm just trying to put them on the map.
So that's like the value of the symptom modification, right? And I think that's where like you might be able to really build that trust, and that's where we look back at like the manual therapy, right? Might be an opportunity to do manual therapy or some manual therapy with this person to reassure them. So it sounds like things went well till they didn't, right? And I mean, we've all been there. Hate when that happens, right? It's like, damn it, I burnt the steak. It's burnt. Once it's burnt, it's burnt.
I think events like that help make us better. You know, it's not how many we can help, it's the ones we failed and that keeps us up at night, that keeps us thinking, trying to get better. Go back and relearn things and reapply it again. And hopefully that translates into the next person that comes in.
So in hindsight, would you probably just done half the volume, and then not push that, and then that would have been like all right, let's see what we do. Session 4, let's load this. Or I don't know where she was at in the acute process, but do you think if you would have cut her when she had that W, right? She feels better walking up and down the stairs. If you were like,
Having that positive experience, having that.
Let's call it here, because now we're at a point where like we're getting positive results. We're going to get to where the more is just more. And once the more is more, like depending on where that person is and how much trust is built, like you can get that's always a sign of resiliency to me, right? Like when I have a person who trusts me, and I flare them up, because if you do flare them up, or they get flared up outside of here, usually it's outside of here, and they come back in, and they're like, I'm like, well, I'm like, what happened? Did it? And they're like, not a big deal, the knee got a little sore, and before that it was like anything that hurt the knee, it's like a crippling mindset. Like they get back to that initial phase. And I think that's like a sign of like, we progressed, where this person's like, it'll be better in like a week. I know what I need to do. That's when you're like, yes, I got this one. Right?
Also setting expectations with their flare-ups will happen, sets a tone in terms of like the process. So a lot of times you're like, they come in, it's like, oh, I feel good. But these things do reoccur. And are they prepared for the next flare-up? And how can they manage it and decrease the timeline of being in that state for longer than what they were?
Yeah. I mean, like to go back to like the kid in the sandbox analogy trying to make friends, when you got that new patient up there, if you got a whole bunch of cool toys, you don't got to show them all that first visit. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
That's where you want to be like, check this one. Oh, that one was good, but check this one out too, right? You just want to show them. You want to show them. That's all. You want to show them all of them. Like, check this one out. You did good on that one, and now they broke the arm off the really advanced Transformer toy.
And starts punching that.
Yeah, that's right. I did not share my toys in the sandbox. Kept those things pristine.
Yeah, it reminds me of one time this isn't a question, but just a thought, but one time a patient told me like they described a flare-up as a test in a friendship.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, that's pretty spot on, right? Because like if we have the ability to reach out, and especially if you practice the way we practice, where we're very open, we text people, message people between sessions and stuff like that, but if we have the ability to have like that conversation, hey, how are you doing? Okay, this is fairly normal, like let's see how it feels in 2 days, like here are some things to expect. If this happens, then let me know, and if this happens, that's good, that's a good sign, things are progressing in the right way. But it just reminded me of that patient that turned to me, he was like, because I asked about debrief one time, and they're like, that's what a flare-up is to me. It's like a test in our friendship. I was like, wow.
High stakes.
Yeah.
High stakes.
There's some things like we learned in school is like, don't be friends with your patients.
Right.
Don't text them. Don't communicate with them outside the clinic. I think that they missed the whole boat on that. When you see somebody maybe once a week, what happens between the 6 days?
Yeah.
How do you manage those things, those flare-ups, keep them motivated, and reassure them? So I think that's very important value in terms of keeping a line of communication.
Yeah, and you can set your boundaries wherever you want, but to me, it's real-time feedback. Like,
Yeah.
they're like, oh, what did I do? I can't even remember what I did this weekend, let alone how my foot felt 5 days ago, right? So it's like getting the real-time feedback is super helpful.
Yeah, the flare-up situation, it's like, I honestly think if we just kept it there, I probably would have been able to treat her. She would have came back, but she didn't. So It's one of those things you'll always remember. But the history is super important. You know, how debilitating are flare-ups for your patients that you're seeing? If it's very debilitating, I'm gonna proceed with more caution. I'm not gonna be as aggressive because I really get to know this person within the next 2 to 3 months before I really start to push. Because if it's super early and I know it's debilitating, I don't want this person to be out of commission.
Yeah, that's gold.
Yeah, especially if they commit to the process. And then the other side of it's like, it's okay to have a flare-up, but this might be a longer duration that you've had without having a flare-up. That's progress. You might have had a flare-up, but it's way less intense than a previous flare-up you had. That's progress. Like, those are ways to measure progress once people feel like they trust you.
Yeah.
That I really
It's
enjoy.
not all or none.
Yeah, and
There's-
sorry.
No, I was just saying there's so many
Yeah.
factors and,
Yeah.
and contextual factors.
And then
that-
a lot of people with these chronic situations, flare-ups, like I want to get pain to get rid of, like right away, stop the pain. Was like, but the little wins is the one that they don't see and value, and that's where we step in. It's like, hey, you made these little improvement. Now you're out of pain for a day, a week, a month. These little things like they don't see,
Yeah.
but we got to re-entrust them.
I didn't even think about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
No, the people that say I never want to be in pain again, I usually tell them, in the future, you won't ever be in pain again with these lower level activities. Like right now, you're having pain just initiating running, but ideally in the future, you won't feel pain until maybe you're in your 10th mile, 12th mile. Like the standard should be so much higher, the threshold should be so much higher. Like I can not promise you that you'll never be in pain again, because that's impossible. But I can promise you that I'll make you more resilient so that you can handle more, you have a bigger buffer before you even get into that conversation.
I think reframing pain too for people is really, really important. And then it's like also, like I'm a chronic pain person, man. Like I lived with something always going on somewhere in my body from some shit that I did. And I think like working with like my guys here, like Kevin and Donald have recently helped me like deal with my situation better, right? Like I've had chronic knee pain on and off for years. Seems like I'll build it up and then I'll stop doing something and I'll get a regression and I'll feel. But being able to like, being a chronic pain person, I heard like another clinician say this, like how they approach it and feel about it, like and accept it or not accept it is really, really, really important. Whether they're in pain or not, if that is not catastrophized into like them not being able to live their life, I think that's really, really important. Moving away from that pain conversation is always huge, right? Like getting it into like lifestyle. How much is this actually affecting you? Is this a small part of your whole being, or is just a large part of a small being, right? Is really, really important. It's just a messy subject. What's helped me personally is just being able to see progress, right? And I think that's why like progressions within exercise create hope for people. And you know, you do want to go, are we just progressing to progress? Are we progressing to get better, right? Like, what happened here, right? Like, what are we doing with these progressions? And I do think that hopeful side of seeing a progression and being able to tie it back into what you're doing keeps you honest as a clinician, right? Like, sometimes you can progress in exercise where it's just like, okay, you're really, 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 really skilled at doing this exercise, which has almost zero carryover at this point to what I'm trying to get you to do, but you're really good at doing something that's hard. But again, like we probably could have just deadlifted at a faster pace and that's gonna get this hip going better. But instead I got you able to do this in this position with this leg while catching a ball, right? So it's, again, progressing to progress, progressing with tying it in to make sense, being a good clinician, but always giving somebody like that feeling of a win is super, super positive. And I think we talked about that in a couple ways. Hey, I know you feel worse today than you did last session, but this is a win because in the past, you would feel this much worse, right? Or it came in this late. Or like, yeah, you played the whole game and you're only playing half of a game, or you're only shooting this much golf and now you're playing all holes. Like, yeah, you still hurt, but this is huge steps forward. You know, we are going this way and not going back that way. I know we can just kind of sit here. I don't want to talk in circles. I do have like a closing question for you, but I want to make sure that these guys both, while we got you here, have any things that you want to ask them.
No, I'm interested in that closing question.
All right, man, so this is how it works. Zombie apocalypse breaks out. At this point, you've been in all kinds of gyms, right? Throughout everywhere. I mean, you presented all kinds of places. you've seen all kinds of cool things in gyms, right? So zombie apocalypse breaks out. You're allowed to have some weapons that you found in a gym. What is your weapon of choice?
How can it not be a mace? You know, like zombies coming at me. I'm swinging a mace.
So he's going mace, right?
Like a lighter mace, like a 5-10 pound mace, or
Yeah, because I need speed.
You need speed, right? Or you get bit. Yeah. I always say they're like the slow zombies. They're not the fast ones. Those fast hyper zombies, they're way too hard to kill.
Like the ones that crawl on all four.
Yeah. No, this is your run-of-the-mill slow zombie, right?
What kind of zombies are these?
Just kind of like the slow one. They're gonna get you with mass. They're gonna eat you, but they're not.
Like a bunch of Fred Dunkins. I would take a speed ladder. I'm like, get away from me! Like, you don't want none of this.
If you put the speed ladder on top of their heads, you're probably gonna get slower, right?
Yeah. They'll probably get slower. You're gonna train the zombies to get slower with a speed ladder.
What's the socioeconomic status of these zombies? I'll be able to give you a clearer answer.
They're just hungry, right? They just want
I have
you.
2 questions for you.
Yeah. So we're just as all zombies are the same level of social economic. Once you are a zombie, you have one social economic standard. It is just to eat non-zombies. So what's the weapon of choice? What is it going to be? A mace?
I think it's a mace or a Bulgarian bag. You know, I'm gonna
Ooh, the
swing it to
Bulgarian
side,
bag. Yeah.
Hit him with it.
I say you go old school with it, right? Like blood sports style. You dip it in glue and glass, the Bulgarian bag. So now you got a little more to it.
dang, I don't remember that from Bloodsport.
Yeah, he did his hands at the kumite or whatever that was. He had, yeah, glass on his nose. Which I'm pretty sure is you punch someone and you got glass on your wraps. They just cut your hands, right? Like it's not a good strategy. It just looks cool.
Nails, you put nails.
What's your strategy? What are you getting?
Oh, I always just throw Kevin at him and run. So I
Kevin's
bring,
gonna take, like, a
I bring
safety
Kevin
salt
with
and
me.
Start turning around. Like.
My choice is a wooden dowel because you can sharpen the edge.
Yeah.
Stab them right in the face.
That's
and
simple.
It's light. You
Just
can have
simple.
velocity in it.
Yeah, and you can find them.
That's
You can use that as a walking stick too.
A wooden dowel?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he likes
You
the
can
wooden.
make it a spear.
Or
Yeah.
a PVC pipe.
That one would be harder to do, but
Yeah.
You gotta respect the force velocity curve. You're not gonna be able to. It's too light. You're not gonna be able to exert enough force.
you just gotta be nimble.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why he chose a mace.
Tape a rock to it.
Yeah,
Sharpen that edge.
that's good. All right. Well, I think we learned a lot today about some things. We'll kind of close this out. Anything you'd want to add? Let's put social media stuff if anyone wanted to contact
tell people
everybody.
about your mentorship, where they can find
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
Definitely. We talked a little bit about
Your
it.
next upcoming events.
Yes,
Mhm.
please.
No, for sure. I appreciate you guys, honestly, for having me on. Super fun, and this makes life a lot better.
Yeah.
Pepsi.
First Diet Pepsi,
Cherry
diet
only.
soda in a week. I usually go through 2 a day. So
Nice.
so to find me, the easiest way to find me would be at Dr. Chen. We have a physical therapy practice in downtown Manhattan, also a second location in Long Island City. We've got a educational business. We do an online mentorship that's 12 weeks worth of content that you have access to for 6 months. There is 2 weekly calls a week, 1 weekly call a month after the initial 3 months, and then we have guest speakers there every single month. You have access to that for as long as it's okay to be in a Zoom room. Hasn't been more than like 20 to something people in a Zoom room live, so we give people access to that, and we try to bring in some of the top guys, researchers, coaches. In-person events, we ran 2 this year. They've been phenomenal, but we got to sharpen the sword a little bit. Got to figure out how to make this a better experience for other people. And we got some great ideas, and I'm excited to see what happens next year.
Yeah, hit this guy up. San Diego people, hit this guy up in San Diego so we can try to get him back down here. We can do an event. Let us know. We can help whatever way that looks. Cool.
Awesome. Appreciate you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, guys. You can find us at our normal handles, Kinetic Impact, both on Instagram. Find us on YouTube. Probably watching it on YouTube here. So, like, comment, share.
Smash that like button.
Smash that. Do all the things. And then you can also email us info@kirehab.com if you have any questions or topics you guys want us to talk about, or just want to say hi. You can say hi. But all right, guys. Until next time.
Peace.
Bye, YouTube.